Hey everyone, I've had people ask me, what is the purpose of using a samurai sword in your training when no one uses a sword anymore? It's quite obsolete nowadays in this century. It's kind of makes no sense to learn how to use something you're never going to use. Very true statement. People don't use a samurai sword nowadays in the 21st century. However, I have found that using the sword in your training really enhances your unarmed combat in many ways, too many to even describe here. When you learn how to use the sword, you're not only honoring tradition, which in some cases that's not a very good argument because no one uses the sword nowadays, which is true. So can we skirt tradition? Can we go around tradition and just skip the sword? Well, you certainly could at your school, at your choice. But we use the sword because it is a very powerful tool in learning the martial art called Budo that we study. When you use a sword, you're forced to use your tanden. Tanden is like the hara, the middle of your body, the core, just below the belly button. When you use the sword, because it's an extension of your hands, it forces you to use your entire body when you cut and when you do martial arts. Unlike sometimes when you don't use a sword, when you use your punches or your kicks, you tend to overextend. You tend to forget to use your legs, therefore you leave openings for attack, and you don't have the power that you would normally have when you use your hara, your tanden, your core to hit. Remember, a good punch starts from your feet, not from your fist. And good sword work is always when your shoulders are over your hips, with very flexed and bent knees. I just have seen people that don't use sword work, and a lot of times their martial arts lack the power. They may be very fast, they're very quick with their hand, but there's not a lot of power behind it. The samurai knew that when you use spears and armor and swords, you had to use your entire body. Remember, they were very small people, so they had to use their whole legs when they used the sword. The sword also teaches us about timing and distancing. When you use a sword, you have to be razor sharp, not just in mind, but in the way you move. And in your distancing has to be perfect, because if you're one little inch off from this kisaki here, you're dead. And most of the sword kills from research and historical were found that the kisaki was killing most of the people. So if I was 1 inch off and too close, I could be scarred for life or killed instantly. So your distancing is really enhanced when you use the sword, when you're armed or unarmed. The katana, there's something magical about using that sword that really teaches you how to use your whole body, how to glide along the floor and use your legs, bend your knees way more than you would normally do. It teaches you about timing and distancing that just other weapons can't do for you. Also, using the sword, it focuses us on how to really use our mental capacity, how to focus on one point of contact, one point of derivative power to make sure that all of my intention is in that cut. Another thing about the sword is it's just really cool. As a ninja, so to speak, you need to know how to use every weapon available. So if someone throws you a sword, you need to know how to use it. Someone throws you a cell phone, you need to know how to use that. Someone throws you a pistol, you need to know the basics of a pistol. All weaponry is on the table if you want to be a really well-rounded martial artist. Just the cool factor of using the sword is fantastic. How many people in the modern day society can really learn how to use this? Very few know how, and very few are skilled at it. So it's really cool to be able to practice this weapon. When you're in your dojo and you want to use the sword, use a wooden sword, a bokken. That will keep things safe, but it also has the heft and the weight to it that a regular sword might have. I use a suburito. A suburito is a very heavy sword made of wood. It looks like a giant oar. That really builds the muscles in your arms, shoulders, hands, and back that you need. You can use an Iai sword if you're doing Iaido, but be very careful. Do not use sharp swords ever. Just use Iaido if you're going to do drawing cuts, or use a boken if you're going to do Kenjutsu of some sort. Kenjutsu you can use with wooden swords with or without a guard. Whether you have the tsuba on it or not is completely optional. Some schools demand a tsuba because the katana had a tsuba. The schools that don't use this, you have disadvantages because you're not getting the true replication of the sword. So I always use ones with guards on them. Do not use those hokey, ridiculous, silly padded swords that you see on the internet. Those came out in the early 2000s and I've always thought that they were ridiculous. I cringe when I see schools, and adults especially, that use those padded fun swords. They're absolutely no good for Kenjutsu. They don't have any weight to them. They don't have any strength to them. They bend like toys. They're like a romper room Nerf toy. They're fine if you want to use them for kids, for safety issues, but do not, under any circumstances, use a padded sword in Kenjutsu. You are fooling yourself. That is not a sword. That is a toy meant for children. Get rid of them, or just keep them for fun Nerf battles or something like that. Other than that, what happens is you learn to use those padded swords, and you get so used to that weight that when a real sword goes in your hand, you're completely useless and you're half-speeded. So make sure you do not use those swords unless they're for fun and games. Otherwise it becomes some sort of slap-tap LARP game for points, and that is not Kenjutsu. Kenjutsu was meant to kill with 1 or 2 strokes max, not to tap people for a point. This is not some sort of D&D game we're playing here. If you want to use real swords, you have to get ones that are heavy and have a lot of heft to them. That's just my opinion, of course. You can disagree, but I've seen a lot of people that use those padded swords. It's no good. So back to the sword. Use it, practice it, respect it. Remember, this was for hundreds and hundreds of years in Japanese history. These swords were the mainstay. They were considered the soul of the samurai. When his sword was broken, he felt broken himself. So treat it with great respect, and really this tool here will really amplify your martial art training. It will make you a far better martial artist when you master the sword, or try to, than if someone was just doing unarmed combat on the mat. That's just my opinion. Use the sword, enjoy it, respect it, and find all of its secrets. There's a lifetime of knowledge in trying to master this one particular beautiful weapon of the samurai. So until next time, you have a great day and enjoy your training, and we'll see you soon, and be careful.